When we look at the world around us, our cities, our machines, our glittering satellites circling above, it feels like humanity has reached the pinnacle of history. We've built so much, so fast, that it's tempting to assume we are the first, the only, to ever achieve this kind of progress. But is that really true? Or are we clinging to a comforting illusion? The Earth itself is unimaginably old, about 4.5 billion years. To put that in perspective, if the entire age of our planet were squeezed into a single calendar year, then all of recorded human civilization, from the first villages to the skyscrapers of today, would appear only in the final minutes of December 31st. Our presence here is not a chapter. It's barely a footnote. We like to measure time in decades, centuries, and perhaps millennia. But the Earth works in scales that dwarf our imagination. Entire mountain ranges rise and crumble within spans of millions of years. Oceans shift, vanish, and reform in new shapes. Continents drift silently, colliding to create new landscapes and erasing the old. Against such forces, what chance does a fragile civilization, ours or anyone else's, have of leaving a permanent mark? Now ask yourself, could intelligence have risen here long before us? Could there have been a species, perhaps not human, that learned to shape the world in ways we can barely comprehend? And if they did, what traces would survive after millions, or even hundreds of millions of years? We might assume that evidence would be everywhere: ruined cities, broken machines, or fossilized tools. But time is a ruthless editor. Stone erodes, metals corrode, and organic matter vanishes almost instantly on geological scales. Even the greatest of our monuments, the pyramids, the Great Wall, the skyscrapers of New York, would crumble into dust long before a million years had passed. If Earth had hosted a civilization 50 million years ago, what would we actually see today? Perhaps nothing at all. It's unsettling, isn't it? We think of ourselves as permanent, as exceptional. Yet when placed against the deep timeline of our planet, we may be just one flicker of light in an endless night. The rocks beneath our feet have seen countless ages come and go, ages of fire, of ice, of unimaginable beasts. Why not an age of intelligence before us? This is the riddle of the forgotten timeline. It whispers to us from the silence of deep time, urging us to reconsider the story we tell ourselves, that humanity is the first and only chapter of civilization. But maybe, just maybe, we are only the latest. And if that is true, then one question becomes impossible to ignore. If another civilization rose and fell before us, what happened to them? And more importantly, could the same fate one day await us? For as long as humans have spoken, we have told stories. Around fires, in temples, across oceans, and through generations, these stories became myths, grand tales of gods, floods, fire, and beings from the sky. Today, we often dismiss them as fantasy. But what if myths are not simply products of imagination? What if they are fractured memories, distorted echoes of real events from a forgotten past? Consider the myth of a great flood. The story of waters rising to swallow the world appears not in one place, but across nearly every culture. From the ancient Sumerians and Babylonians to the story of Noah in the Bible, from Hindu traditions of Manu's boat to Native American legends of deluge, the theme repeats. Could so many cultures have imagined the same story by coincidence? Or are they all remembering the same ancient catastrophe? Perhaps one rooted in real floods at the end of the last ice age, when glaciers melted and oceans surged. Then there are the myths of fire from the heavens, tales of blazing comets, falling stars, and skies torn apart. Indigenous Australian lore speaks of fiery serpents descending. Ancient Greeks told of Phaethon losing control of the sun's chariot, burning the earth. These may sound like allegories, but they could also be collective memories of meteor impacts or volcanic cataclysms witnessed by our distant ancestors. And what about the sky beings? stories of gods descending from the heavens, wielding strange powers, or teaching humanity secret knowledge. From the Watchers of Mesopotamia to the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl, of Mesoamerica, such myths echo across continents separated by oceans. Were these merely symbolic stories, or distorted accounts of encounters with something beyond human understanding? Modern science sometimes provides unexpected support for these tales. Geologists uncover evidence of ancient floods, sudden climate shifts, and impact events that align uncannily with oral traditions. Archaeologists discover ruins that match local legends of lost lands or fallen cities. Could it be that these myths were humanity's earliest attempt to record history, not with writing or stone, but with story and memory? Think of it this way. Before books, before paper, before even carved symbols, how did our ancestors preserve the lessons of survival? They wove them into stories, dramatic, symbolic, and powerful enough to last for thousands of years. And while details may have been exaggerated or reshaped, the essence of real events could remain, hidden beneath layers of metaphor. So when we hear a tale of gods casting down fire, or oceans swallowing entire worlds, should we laugh it off as fantasy, or lean closer, listening for the grain of truth? Perhaps myths are not simply entertainment for ancient people. Perhaps they are the encrypted memories of civilization, carried forward through generations, so that even if writing was lost, even if cities crumbled, the story would remain. If that is true, then the myths we dismiss so easily might be the last surviving whispers of a much older human experience. Fragments of a history that official timelines have forgotten. And if we dare to listen carefully, they may be hinting at something profound. That humanity's past is far stranger, far more turbulent, and perhaps far more advanced than we have been taught to believe. The Earth is a vast archive, layer upon layer of stone quietly recording the passage of time. To scientists, these layers are a history book, each stratum telling the story of an age long gone. Fossils mark the rise and fall of species. Minerals whisper of ancient climates. But every so often, something strange emerges from the stone, something that doesn't seem to belong. These discoveries are called anomalies, out-of-place artifacts, objects that appear in geological layers, where, by all logic, they shouldn't exist. A carved figure found in a coal seam, said to be millions of years old. Metal spheres dug from deep mines, perfectly shaped and bearing patterns, as though crafted with intention. Tools or imprints resembling hammers, nails, or even mechanical parts, sealed in rock, far older than humanity's accepted timeline. How can such things exist? Some claim these anomalies are nothing more than hoaxes, the product of human imagination or fraud. Others argue they are simple misunderstandings, natural formations that only look artificial to the untrained eye. And often, the official explanation stops there. Case closed. Mystery solved. But is it really that simple? Imagine holding in your hand a stone that formed hundreds of millions of years ago, only to discover inside it an object that seems unmistakably human. Even if 9 explanations fail, and only one remains plausible, should we not at least ask the uncomfortable question, what if the object is real? Skeptics remind us that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and they are right. Yet it is also true that history has repeatedly taught us to be cautious before dismissing what doesn't fit. Not so long ago, scholars insisted that stones chipped by ancient humans were nothing more than the product of natural erosion, until evidence proved otherwise. What was once dismissed as chance became recognized as the handiwork of early humans. Could the same be true here? Could some of these so-called anomalies be whispers of a much older chapter in Earth's story? Consider the possibility. If another intelligent species walked this planet millions of years ago, their legacy might be unimaginably faint. A few objects, a scattering of tools, fragments eroded and buried by time. In that light, even a single unexplained artifact would be a clue of staggering importance. Of course, the academic world is cautious. To rewrite history requires more than curiosity. It requires proof beyond doubt. But here lies the paradox. The deeper we dig into Earth's history, the more time conspires to erase the evidence. Stone swallows it, pressure crushes it, heat melts it away. What remains may look like nonsense, or worse, like an illusion. And yet, the anomalies continue to appear. Not many, not often, but just enough to raise a quiet unease. What if, in our rush to explain them away, we are closing the door on evidence that challenges our place in time? Perhaps these objects are nothing more than natural curiosities. Or perhaps they are the faint fingerprints of forgotten hands, proof that we are not the first to walk the path of intelligence on this planet. The truth remains hidden, sealed in stone. But one thing is certain. The deeper we look, the more the Earth reminds us that its secrets are far from fully revealed. When we picture the earliest humans, we often imagine them armed with nothing more than rough stones, chipped and cracked into crude edges. To modernize, these tools may seem almost too simple, too primitive, to be the starting point of civilization. And yet, those very stones represent one of the greatest leaps our species ever made. The moment when thought began shaping the raw material of nature into something with purpose. But here's the twist. For a long time, even the experts didn't recognize them. When archaeologists and geologists first uncovered these chipped stones, many believed they were nothing more than accidents of erosion, rocks broken by the forces of nature, not by the hand of man. To the untrained eye, a tool and a stone looked nearly the same. It was only when patterns began to emerge, consistent flaking on the edges, a rhythm to the breaks, marks of deliberate shaping, that the truth revealed itself. These weren't just rocks. They were the earliest artifacts of intelligence. This lesson carries with it a haunting implication. If humanity's own beginnings were almost dismissed as random geology, what else might we still be overlooking today? Think about it. The oldest stone tools we know are more than 2.5 million years old. For much of history, no one believed humans, or anything like us, could have existed so far back. And yet, there they were, hiding in plain sight, mistaken for nature's handiwork, until someone dared to look closer. So let us ask the uncomfortable question. If evidence of our own ancestors was so easily ignored, what happens if something older, stranger, or more advanced lies waiting? Could a far more ancient intelligence have left behind fragments that we now dismiss as meaningless? Perhaps a shard of metal embedded in stone, waved away as contamination. A fossil-like imprint that doesn't match any known species, labeled as erosion. Even patterns cut into rock, if they don't fit the accepted timeline, may be explained away as coincidence. But what if they aren't? The challenge is one of perspective. We see what we expect to see. When researchers finally recognized stone tools for what they were, it was because they allowed for the possibility. Until then, the evidence was invisible, not because it didn't exist, but because the mind refused to frame it as artificial. Could we be standing at the edge of the same mistake today? Could some of the mysteries we dismiss, out-of-place artifacts, unexplained markings, odd chemical signatures, actually be the faint whispers of a civilization older than our own? It may sound impossible, but remember, impossibility is often just the measure of our imagination at a given moment in time. Once, the idea of humans crafting tools 2 million years ago was unthinkable. Once, the existence of ancient cities buried beneath deserts or jungles was dismissed as legend. And yet, time and discovery forced us to rewrite the story. So maybe, just maybe, the Earth still holds chapters we have yet to recognize. Tools not of stone, but of some forgotten craft. Evidence not of erosion, but of intention. The question is simple, the answer far less so. When we look at the oldest layers of our planet, are we truly seeing them as they are, or only as we expect them to be? Because if history has taught us anything, it's that the line between a rock and a tool is thinner than we think. When we talk about history, we often divide it neatly into ages: the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. These labels give us the impression that technology always marches forward in a predictable line, each era defined by the materials it mastered. But what if that's just our story, and not the only way civilization could unfold? What if somewhere, long before us, there was an advanced society that never used metal at all? At first, that might sound impossible. Metal tools, machines, and structures feel essential to progress. But is that truly the only path? Imagine a culture that mastered wood, bone, fiber, clay, and fire in ways far beyond our expectations. A world where cities rose not in steel and stone, but in vast wooden frameworks, where tools were crafted from bone and hardened by fire, where woven fibers created machines, armor, and even structures that rivaled our own in strength. Now here's the unsettling part. Materials like these do not last. Wood rots, fibers decay, bone crumbles, even fire leaves behind only ashes, quickly washed away by wind and rain. Within just a few centuries, let alone thousands or millions of years, an entire civilization made of such things could vanish without a trace. No ruins, no artifacts, no monuments, just silence. Think about our own world for a moment. If all metal vanished from our cities, what would remain? Skyscrapers stripped of their steel frames would collapse into rubble. Wooden houses would be gone within decades. Cloth, rope, paper, plastics, most would dissolve in the relentless cycle of decay. Only stone structures, like temples or monuments, might endure. But if a civilization never built in stone at all, its memory could be erased almost instantly by the passage of time. And yet, doesn't this raise a haunting question? Could civilizations have already risen and fallen on Earth, not marked by iron or bronze, but by materials too fragile for the ages to preserve? Could entire societies have thrived in balance with nature, leaving behind little more than soil, enriched by their fires and faint disturbances in the land? Even today, traces of lost cultures challenge us. Wooden tools and woven artifacts uncovered in peat bogs or frozen ground are so rare they feel miraculous. They remind us that history is biased toward what survives, not necessarily toward what existed. How many more stories might be missing, simply because the materials dissolved before we ever had a chance to see them? If intelligence did bloom long before us, Perhaps it was not marked by glittering metal, but by ingenuity with what the earth readily gave, materials that vanish as quickly as they appear. We measure progress by durability, but what if progress, for them, was measured differently, through sustainability, through harmony, through a mastery of the perishable, civilizations without metal? It sounds alien. Yet it could be the most human story of all, one written and erased countless times before we ever arrived. So the next time we look at an empty field, an untouched forest, or a barren stretch of desert, we should ask ourselves, is it truly untouched? Or could it be the graveyard of a society that built marvels from fragile things, marvels now swallowed by time? Because in the vast book of Earth's history, not every chapter is carved in stone. Some may have been written in wood, bone, and fire, and then turned to dust. The Earth is not a museum. It is alive, restless, and always changing. Mountains rise and crumble. Rivers carve valleys, then shift their course. Oceans swallow coastlines, while deserts bury entire landscapes in sand. To us, ruins feel permanent, but to the planet, they are temporary scratches on a surface that is constantly rewriting itself. Imagine for a moment one of our greatest cities, New York, Cairo, Beijing. Now fast forward 1,000,000 years. Would any of it remain? The answer is unsettling. Stone may crumble, metal may corrode, glass may shatter. Even concrete, which we like to think of as eternal, breaks down under the slow but relentless power of wind, water, and frost. And beneath all of this, the Earth itself is recycling. Tectonic plates shift, grind, and dive beneath one another, swallowing entire regions back into the mantle. In deep time, even mountains disappear. So, what chance does a city have? This is why archaeologists and geologists often rely on fragile, indirect clues, hints written not in monuments, but in soil. Thin black bands of charcoal can reveal ancient fires. Layers of pollen can whisper which forests once grew in places now barren. Shifts in chemistry can reveal agriculture, industry, or sudden collapse. Soil is an archive, but it is a delicate one. A single flood, a landslide, or centuries of erosion can erase entire pages. And here's the chilling thought. The absence of ruins does not mean the absence of life. Think of ancient Troy, once thought to be nothing more than legend, until faint traces were uncovered beneath layers of earth. Or consider entire civilizations in the Amazon, hidden for centuries beneath dense jungle, revealed only recently through subtle soil patterns and faint outlines of forgotten structures. If we nearly missed cultures just a few thousand years old, how much more could be lost if we look back? Millions? Earth is both the keeper and destroyer of memory. It preserves bones in amber, cities in volcanic ash, ships beneath shifting sands. Yet it also erases with equal efficiency, grinding artifacts into dust, burying landscapes beneath lava, and recycling crust into new stone. It is as if the planet guards its secrets, allowing only fragments of the past to slip through. So let's return to that haunting question. If another civilization once walked this earth long before us, how much of their story would we ever find? Would it be a monument standing defiantly against time? Or only a faint chemical trace in a forgotten layer of soil, a clue so subtle we might overlook it? Deep time is patient, and memory is fragile. For every fossil we discover, countless others have already been erased. For every ruin we admire, countless more have crumbled beyond recognition. The mystery lies not just in what we have uncovered, but in what has been lost forever. and the soil beneath our feet may hold the only whispers of those vanished worlds. Whispers that fade with every passing storm, every shifting plateau, every heartbeat of the earth itself. Because in the end, the question is not whether Earth can erase history. The question is, how much has already been erased? What if humanity disappeared tomorrow? Not in a blaze of catastrophe, not in fire or flood, but simply gone. No more footsteps, no more voices, no more hands maintaining the fragile systems we've built. What would remain of us? And more importantly, how long would those remains endure? At first, the world would still look familiar. Skyscrapers would stand tall, cars would sit quietly in their parking lots, and satellites would continue circling overhead. But without maintenance, the unraveling would begin almost immediately. Lights would flicker out within days, power plants would shut down, subways would flood. Bridges and buildings, designed to be checked, repaired, and reinforced, would begin to fail. Within decades, forests would overtake suburbs, vines crawling over crumbling walls. Highways would crack under roots, and once busy cities would vanish beneath green canopies or shifting sands. To the eye of nature, our world would dissolve faster than we dare to imagine. But even as our monuments crumble, something stranger would remain. Our ghosts, written into the very fabric of the earth. Consider plastics. Billions of tons of them scattered across the oceans, buried in landfills, drifting as microscopic dust in the air. Plastics degrade, but they do not vanish. Millions of years from now, they could survive as thin layers of synthetic residue pressed into rock, forming what geologists might one day call plastiglomerates, stones fused with the remains of our throwaway culture. Or think of radiation. Nuclear power and weaponry have scattered isotopes across the globe, unnatural elements that will take tens of thousands of years to decay. To a geologist of the distant future, these isotopes would appear like a strange fingerprint, a chemical scar no volcanic eruption or asteroid impact could explain. Even our appetite for resources leaves evidence. Artificial fertilizers have altered nitrogen cycles in the soil. Burning fossil fuels has shifted the balance of carbon in the atmosphere. Mining and industry have redistributed rare earth elements in ways no natural process could. These, too, will linger, quiet signals hidden in the chemistry of stone. And yet, for all our data, for all our digital towers of memory, almost nothing of our knowledge would remain. Hard drives corrode, paper decays. Even the strongest servers cannot survive centuries without care. Entire libraries of human thought would dissolve into silence, leaving only physical traces behind. Our story, our art, our voices, gone. So what image of us would the earth preserve? Perhaps only a thin, strange layer in the crust, a sudden spike of plastics, a scattering of radioactive isotopes, fossil fuels burned into carbon signatures, maybe a few ruins of stone, pyramids, carved monuments, or Mount Rushmore, still recognizable, but stripped of meaning. To a future intelligence, we would appear not as lords of the planet, but as a brief anomaly, a curious disturbance in the long, steady rhythm of geology. And here is the chilling symmetry. If this is how our civilization might one day be remembered or forgotten, then how many before us could have already vanished in the same way? How many layers of history might be buried beneath our feet, their cities erased, their stories dissolved, their ghosts reduced to nothing more than a chemical whisper? We may believe we are eternal, but the T-Earth. If another civilization once walked this earth before us, why do we not remember them? Why does history remain silent, the record seemingly blank, as if humanity is the only intelligence ever to rise from the soil? Perhaps the answer is not that they never existed, but that they lived in ways we cannot imagine. Civilizations are fragile things. We often think of them as permanent, but in truth, they are like sandcastles on the shore. One great wave, a famine, a plague, a war, a sudden climate shift, and even the mightiest culture can crumble overnight. Could an earlier society have risen, flourished, and fallen so quickly that time itself simply swallowed the evidence? Or maybe their secret lies not in their collapse, but in the way they lived. Think of our world today. We carve mountains, drain rivers, and leave scars across the earth that can be seen from space. But what if there was once a civilization that chose the opposite path? A people who lived lightly, blending into the forests, harmonizing with rivers, leaving no stone monuments to proclaim their greatness. Would we even notice them after thousands or millions of years? Their villages of wood would rot, their fabrics would dissolve, their tools of bone or clay would vanish in the soil. All that might remain are faint imprints, too subtle for us to recognize. And here's another possibility. Perhaps they never built monuments at all. Perhaps they measured greatness not in stone and steel, but in wisdom, balance, and survival. Our species leaves behind skyscrapers and satellites, but theirs may have left only myths carried forward in whispers. Stories of sky beings, flood survivors, or fire from the heavens may not be pure invention, but echoes of those who came before, distorted, half-remembered, drifting through the centuries like smoke from a fire long extinguished. It is a humbling thought. We define civilization by what we leave behind: monuments, cities, machines. But what if the truest civilizations leave almost nothing at all? What if they understood that permanence is an illusion, that balance with nature is wiser than defiance of it? Imagine a people who lived for tens of thousands of years in harmony, never exhausting their resources, never scattering radioactive scars, never choking oceans with plastic. A civilization measured not in monuments, but in longevity. If such a society vanished, what proof would remain for us to discover? Perhaps none at all. And that may be the greatest mystery. Absence is not evidence. Silence in the soil does not mean silence in history. The earth erases, the earth conceals, and the earth remembers only what it chooses to preserve. So when we look around and see no sign of forgotten civilizations, the question is not simply, did they exist? The deeper question may be, what if they did exist and chose not to be remembered? Perhaps the vanished ones are not missing from history. Perhaps they are simply invisible, living on, not in ruins or artifacts, but in the myths, the echoes, and the unanswered questions that still haunt our imagination. Imagine for a moment that evidence of a forgotten civilization really does exist. A fragment buried deep within the earth, a signal written into stone, or a chemical trace unlike anything nature could produce. The question is not only whether such proof exists, but whether we would even recognize it. Science is cautious by design. It demands extraordinary evidence before rewriting history. And yet, deep time plays tricks. It erases context, scatters clues, and leaves behind fragments, too incomplete to tell a full story. A carved stone found in an ancient layer may be dismissed as erosion. A strange sphere of metal might be labeled a natural formation. An unusual isotope might be explained away as volcanic activity. The problem is not always absence of evidence, but our willingness to see it for what it might be. Think about how long it took for archaeologists to accept that Neanderthals created art, or that early humans reached the Americas far earlier than once believed. For decades, the evidence was there: stone tools, traces of fire, markings on cave walls, but it was ignored, doubted, or buried under the weight of established timelines. If it is so difficult to shift our view of human history by a few thousand years, how much harder would it be to extend it back millions? Perhaps the legacy of a lost civilization is not in towering monuments, but in subtler signatures, in the soil, in the chemistry of rocks, in the biology of life itself. Imagine discovering an unusual concentration of isotopes in ancient strata. Is it a natural quirk, or the trace of long-vanished industry? Imagine a fossilized pattern of molecules that looks suspiciously engineered. Would we see intelligence in it, or dismiss it as coincidence. The challenge is that we expect intelligence to look like us. We search for cities, machines, tools, carved in stone. But what if their expression of intelligence was entirely different? What if they shaped ecosystems instead of monuments, encoded knowledge into biology instead of libraries, or built with materials designed to dissolve back into the earth? Would we recognize such a civilization at all? Or would it pass by unnoticed, its memory erased not by time, but by our assumptions? Even today, anomalies spark debate. Strange artifacts surface in unexpected layers. Odd geological features defy easy explanation. Yet more often than not, they are brushed aside, labeled hoaxes, or explained away. Sometimes, skepticism blinds us as much as belief. So the question lingers. If undeniable proof of a civilization before ours lay hidden in the soil beneath our feet, would we even believe it? Or would it be dismissed, forgotten, and lost once again? Just another whisper swallowed by time. The hardest part of uncovering ancient mysteries may not be finding the evidence at all. It may be recognizing intelligence when it doesn't match our expectations. And if history has taught us anything, it is this: the earth may still hold secrets beyond imagination, waiting patiently for us to learn how to see them. For all our science, all our exploration, all our endless curiosity, one question remains suspended above us like a shadow. Are we the first, or just the latest? The earth is ancient beyond comprehension. 4.5 billion years of storms, fire, oceans, and shifting land. Modern humans have been here for only a flicker of that time, a mere heartbeat in the planet's story. If intelligence could rise once, why not twice, or 3 times? Could it be that we are not unique, but simply the most recent blossom in a cycle of growth, collapse, and rebirth? It is a humbling thought. Civilizations may come and go like tides, each leaving faint traces before vanishing into silence. We imagine ourselves at the peak of progress. But what if we are simply standing on the latest peak of a long-forgotten mountain range? How many times has intelligence bloomed, only to wither, leaving behind little more than whispers in stone, fragments in myth, and mysteries that haunt the soil? The truth is, certainty may never be ours. Evidence dissolves, monuments crumble. Time buries everything under layers of earth, sand, and sea. Perhaps the very nature of deep time ensures that the greatest mysteries are beyond our grasp. We may never know for sure if others came before us. And yet, isn't that uncertainty itself powerful? Think of it. The absence of proof forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge, to recognize that we are not masters of Earth's history, but students peering into a vast, half-erased book. Each discovery, an unusual artifact, a myth echoing across cultures, a chemical signature in ancient stone, reminds us that the past may be larger, stranger, and more complex than we dare imagine. Perhaps the most lasting legacy of any civilization is not the ruins it leaves behind, but the questions it inspires. The possibility of the unknown humbles us. It makes us wonder if intelligence is not a rare accident, but a rhythm of the earth itself, rising, falling, returning in cycles across ages. So here we are, gazing at the stars, digging through the soil, searching for signs of others, whether from distant planets or from deep within our own past. And as we search, the question lingers like an echo. Are we alone in history, or simply alone in this moment? Maybe one day we will find proof. Maybe we won't. But perhaps the most profound truth is this: the mystery itself matters more than the answer, because it reminds us that we are temporary, fragile, and part of a story far larger than ourselves. And in that story, our role may not be to solve the riddle of forgotten civilizations, but to carry forward the wonder, to leave behind our own questions for the future to uncover. In the end, the Earth may erase our cities, our monuments, even our names. But the humbling question, the one that has haunted humanity since the beginning, will endure. Were we the first, or just the latest?